Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. It's Tuesday and the patch notes have been posted. You might have missed it because the client is currently having some issues, so if you guys are trying to play League of Legends right now, that's not going to work. But either way, we're here with the top 5 changes of patch 12.9 for your guys' perusal today. As always, I'll be going through the biggest changes in this week's patch, and letting you guys know what you'll be looking forward to in the coming weeks. 12.9 has a bunch of really fun stuff here, especially some of the mid-scope updates are finally coming live with this patch, but we'll be covering those later, as I feel like those are bigger changes than some of these early ones. So let's go ahead and scroll all the way down here to Renekton, who has the number 5 spot this week. Now, these changes are intended for Riot to not only bump up Renekton's power in, I think, a good place, but also to equalize the gap between a W-Max second Renekton and an E-Max second Renekton. Now, the skill discrepancy between those two is actually quite massive. E-Max Renekton second, of course, wins a lot more often than W second max, and that's because generally W second max players are in average play and they don't understand how important the mobility is for Renekton, and that W is more of a one-point wonder type ability. As a result, Riot are actually trying to even out that gap in, I think, a good way by just giving Renekton better incentives for him to max W second. They did remove some power from it early on in the game, but it's significantly better if you are maxing it second. So if you were a W max second Renekton player, you can actually do that, and hopefully your win rate isn't as bad as it was before this. Right, I've also done some changes here to give Renekton just overall better scaling by buffing up his base stat growth, so Renekton should be feeling better in the later stages of the game to make him less of a volatile pick and more of a pick that's going to work. He's still going to be stronger early game, but a pick that doesn't have to win the game by 20 minutes or he becomes irrelevant. So overall, a big fan of these changes. Moving on down to the items, our number 4 slot is the Hullbreaker nerfs. Hullbreaker was very, very powerful as a first max item because its laning phase, there aren't going to be very many champions nearby, especially allied champions, and that allowed top laners to rush this and just gain a ginormous stick of stats that would allow them to beat up their opponent if they didn't also build Hullbreaker, on top of giving them some tower threat. These changes mean that Hullbreaker has actually a literal divide. Its scaling is better after level 11 than it is before level 11. What this means is that if you are buying this item first, you are going to be really feeling a drop in your resistances versus buying it after level 11, at which point it will feel much better. This sets it apart as a good second or third item. I think third item is probably where it's going to be pushed to, unless you're doing something like buying a Tiamat first and then going for your first completed item. Then you could probably build this second if you wanted to, but it won't be as good as a rush item anymore, so I would probably advise against rushing this on patch 12.9. Scrolling on up for our number 3 changes here, we're talking about Pyke. Now, Pyke had some really crazy experimental changes on the PvE that did not go live, but suffice to say, Riot are looking for opportunities to make Pyke feel less like he has to be played mid lane and more like he should be played as a bot lane support. Mid lane Pyke had something like a 53% win rate on this last patch, which is kind of crazy. So Riot are trying to give him some nerfs here that aren't overall removing power, they're just trying to shift power more towards the supportive role. As a result, Death from Below no longer gives Pyke himself a cut whenever he kills a champion or whenever an ally kills a champion that's in the AoE of his ultimate. And Bone Skewer now refunds mana upon hitting an enemy champion, but has an increased mana cost as a result. Now, this is interesting for me because this means that if you're bot lane Pyke, you are nerfed on this patch. If you are not hitting your Bone Skewers, you are costing yourself a lot of mana. However, if Pyke needs this ability a lot more in mid lane, so it does hit mid lane Pyke harder than bot lane Pyke. So overall, these are net nerfs to Pyke, but I'm hoping that they're enough to get Pyke to be played more at support and less at mid lane, which I think support Pyke is healthier for the game overall. So we'll see if these actually accomplish it though, as this is not the first round of nerfs that Riot have aimed at mid lane Pyke. Finally, we can actually start talking about these mid-scope updates. Now, I have done videos on both of these, so if you guys are curious, I will have them linked down in the description below. Obviously, Swain's has already come out, but if you're interested in the Olaf changes and Taliyah changes, I've made full videos that go into the entire nitty-gritty on that, so don't worry about me trying to cover everything that's changing. Suffice it to say, the Taliyah changes here are aimed at making her feel better to play in casual play, and also giving her a lot of quality of life changes that will make her feel better to play on top of it, even if it's not necessarily buffs. The most important highlights of the Taliyah changes here are that Q's AoE is back. Your stones will now do damage in an AoE, and your worked ground Q is actually very interesting. It still throws a single stone, but now that stone has a bigger area of effect, does more damage, and slows targets in the area of effect as well, which is pretty nice. Taliyah's W no longer does any damage, but was buffed basically across the board to compensate for that. And Taliyah's Unraveled Earth, the mines now stun enemies that try to dash through them or that are displaced through them. And the AoE has also changed. It is now longer and narrower as opposed to the shorter and fatter version that it was previously. There's also a very small dash Taliyah gets when she's leaving her wall that you actually get to tell her to do, so that's kind of nice as well. I think these changes overall should make Taliyah feel much more like a mobility counter mid lane, and just in general feel like a better to-play champion. Right now she's a little clunky, and I'm really happy to see these changes. But again, if you want the full details, go ahead and take a look at the video that I have linked down in the description. Finally, my number one change on this patch is the Olaf mid-scope rework. And the reason for this is that these are the changes that I'm very scared about in pro play especially. I know these changes are aimed at reducing some of Olaf's just raw power in pro play, but they definitely have given him a lot of tools that are going to make him really scary. First and foremost, his passive now longer gives him lifesteal that scales with his missing health as well as attack speed, so that's going to make him significantly better. And his W, instead of giving him lifesteal on activation, now gives him a shield upon activation, hence its reworked name, Tough It Out, from Vicious Strikes. On top of that, Ragnarok has a much shorter duration overall, but it now can have an infinite duration as long as Olaf is continually attacking champions with basic attacks or his Reckless Swing. So Olaf has a very limited window to get himself stuck in with Ragnarok, but as long as he's able to do so, he can keep it running indefinitely. That means that you have a Berserker who is uncrowd controllable, who was hitting you constantly, and that duration will never run out. This is very, very scary for people to deal with, especially with the added durability he gains from his shield, and I'm really expecting Olaf to feel very powerful. He also now has an armor shred on his Q if he hits a champion with it, which again is the kind of thing that's going to make him very scary. However, there is a minimum lockout duration on his Q. He has to wait at least 3 seconds since he last threw an axe to throw another axe. This means that if you're point blank throwing axes at somebody, you can't do that as easily as you could before. You have to wait at least that 3-second window. But overall, I think these changes make Olaf very, very scary and potentially pro play viable in a big way. So he is definitely a champion I would keep an eye on moving into patch 12.9. And that is going to be it for me today, guys. Thank you all so very much for watching. Let me know which changes you're most excited for down in the comment section below. I can't wait to get my hands on the new Olaf, but you guys will have to let me know your thoughts. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload it every Monday, Friday, and on patch days like today as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.